guys, just wanted to give this mini tutorial course a quick intro. I was browsing around on Blender Artist the other day and I came across this picture. Very interesting to me, had a lot of detail. I clicked on the link and I went to this picture, which is a larger picture of it. And it turns out that someone had asked, what did all you do for the greebling on the depot? And Eden T, the creator of the image, said, I have used displacement map on the station. And I looked at that and I thought, wow, that's a lot of detail using displacement maps. And because I've recently been playing around with cycles, I knew that it could do some displacement maps. So I thought I'd learn more about it. If you look at these images I've created and this tutorial that follows, all of this can be done with the free version of Blender and no add-on. I'm using some add-ons to help move things forward and get there a little bit quicker. But this can all be done very simply with existing geometry and maybe a Greeble pack that you might have, or generate your own Greeble pack. The other thing I'll mention is that all of these are explorations. They're not concept art and they're not expected to reflect a final design of any kind. This spaceship I'm creating is focused on understanding micro displacement in Blender. The goal was, how can I create a spaceship as fast as possible in only an hour or less even. So I hope you enjoy this micro tutorial. I know it's a little bit long, but I've broken it up into chapters for you so you can skip over the parts that you may already know about. So let's go ahead and get started. Hey, what's up guys, Chip here, and today I thought I would go over how I created this particular spaceship. Specifically, I used a few add-ons. You can create this without using any add-ons if you like. It's pretty straightforward. One of the great things that just happened was that I was able to get a copy of K-Cycles from my good friend Eric Klein, and with K-Cycles, now I am able to render blazingly fast in cycles, which I haven't been able to do previously. And so now I'm really looking at using cycles for a lot of my renderings. And of course, as you know, if you can render in cycles, you can now do things like displacement maps. So what are displacement maps? And we'll get to that in just a second. But also want to mention my good friend Mark Kingsnorth has created a couple different add-ons that I use to create the basic shape of this spacecraft. And so without further ado, let's take a quick look at what this guy looks like. So I'm going to move over to solid mode. And as you can see in solid mode, this is a very simple, straightforward spacecraft. In fact, I just have a few Greebles placed in certain areas, as you can tell. And I'm going to talk about how we did this. These Greebles were all created for KitOps, and I used SYNTH to place them correctly on this vehicle, as you can see. And then, of course, for those of you that know SYNTH, you'll recognize this is one of the corridors that I created with one button that would generate this. And then I use a program called JSDisplace to create displacement maps. And displacement maps are really very simple. And here's an example of a displacement map. It's just a black and white or grayscale image. And what it does is anything that's white comes closer to you from a geometric standpoint. So all the white stuff is going to get closer to you. All the dark stuff is going to get farther away. So if we go back to this image here, and I'm going to go into the shader editor, and you're going to see we have this image map, which is right here, this crap pack scale 95-4 ping. So that's the actual image that we're now going to use to displace onto our object. And now, of course, as I mentioned earlier, displacement only works in cycles. And if you want to learn more about how to use displacement, I have a very handy guide which I will share with you right now. So this guide is at cw1.me/displacement. And it kind of goes over all of the settings for displacement, what it is, the different ways you can use displacement, and in particular, how to troubleshoot displacement, especially if you don't have a super powerful system. So I recommend, if you want to get more into displacement, we'll talk about it a little bit later on, but if you want to get more into it, I recommend you jump into this particular document and check it out. Especially check out this part that says notes, where you may find that you have issues with micro displacement, in particular memory issues with optics. Just want to let you know that this is out there and you should definitely check this out. So let me talk a little bit about the add-ons we're going to use for this. The first one is by Mark Kingsnorth. Actually, he'll have the first two. And he has this great add-on called Shape Generator. And he has another one called Plating Generator. And both of these are pretty fantastic. And they really help you, especially if you're trying to explore different shapes and everything. So I would highly recommend looking at Shape Generator and Plating Generator if you get a chance from Mark Kingsnorth. And the other thing about Mark is that Mark's also the developer behind SYNTH. Mark's a great guy, really, really smart, and he creates great product. So next I want to talk about JSDisplacement. This is a free product, and it is a standalone application that runs on Windows, and it will generate those same displacement maps that I showed earlier. Here's JSDisplacement, and it opens up to this fancy startup screen. You click this button up here, and typically you go right into JSDisplacement 2, and you'll next click on this crap pack, and it'll generate a displacement, and you just keep doing this if you want, and it'll keep generating them. And you can change these settings. And what I like to do is I like to set the sprite scaling up to something a little bit larger, like maybe 90, and get something a little bit bigger, because at the smaller scales, it actually generates too tight of a displacement, I think. And so I end up having to zoom up on it. And this, when you save the height, it's going to actually create a height map for you. It's a PNG, and it'll create that height map, and it's going to create it at 8K. So I would suggest after you create it 8K, go in, open it up, and save it at 4K. If you're only using one in a scene, then 8K may be fine. But when you're using a lot of them, 4K might be better. So especially if you don't have a lot of memory. The other one I would look at is this classic, and it generates a different kind of displacement maps. So if you're using two different maps inside the same scene, I'd recommend doing one classic and one of that crap pack. And then of course, lastly, we look at this dot grid one, and the dot grid one actually creates little bitty lights. And these are lights that can be overlaid in your material. And I'm going to show you how you add all these together. Plus I will give you a material that works with all of these. But again, with this, you might want to generate a little larger scale and see if that doesn't work better for you. It just kind of depends. You can also adjust the scale, obviously, inside of Blender. So those are the three different maps I would look at generating. The one last thing I'll mention is that if you go into something like this crap pack, not only do you get this grayscale, but you can also toggle this colorizer, and you can actually choose different color variations of this if you want to use these as some kind of image map on top of it. I haven't done that, but it's certainly something that's worth looking at. That is JSPlacement. Once we've got that downloaded and we've created our displacement maps, and of course, then we've added them, I would suggest finding your own and replacing the ones in my material with yours. And once you've added them, you can see that it's going to generate all this other extra detail on our model. And right now, this isn't coming in at the full resolution. We'll talk a little bit about that later on, but you can see exactly the kind of detail that we're expecting to get when we finally do our render. Those are the products. Okay, let's get started by creating the basic shape for the spacecraft. And I'll start off by going into preferences here, and I'll look at my add-ons, and when I install, I'll just install the zip file I got from Mark Kingsnorth. And I installed two different add-ons. One is the random 3D shape generator, and the second is generate plates with Greebles. And I'm not going to go into great detail. Mark does that himself on a few videos, but I'm going to show you basically how I work with these, okay? So after they're installed correctly, I'll go Shift A, Mesh, and I'll go to Shape Generator. And over here is a list of all the things that I've got going. I can use this random C to just continue to generate new and unique shapes. The extrusions are going to be the number of extrusions, so I may want to add more of those as I go. And then we can change the length of them. And for the most part, this is really where I live. Nothing much more other than the fact that I don't want faces overlapping, so I make sure that that doesn't happen. And I'll just start, clicking on random C till I get something that starts to look like it might have some potential. Then I may just, start adding some more extrusions to it to see what happens when I do that. Certainly I want to make sure I'm mirroring about the X-axis. So this is the front. And so I can get something like this. Now the other thing I can do is I can go into operator presets, and I actually have one called Ship Chip. And this is the one that we use to create the spaceship. So I'm going to go ahead and stick with this one for now. And then once we're done, I'm going to take this and I'm going to scale it up. the scale is going to be with regard to the human. So I can move it. Yeah, maybe something like this might be good right there. Move him to my basic scene. And there's our generated shape. The next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to basically break this up into surfaces. And so to do that, we use the generate plates, and that's an F3, and we just go generate plates right here like this. And as you can see, this is going to generate parting lines and plates for this whole object. And again, we will go in here and we have a seed. Notice all the plates are actually on the edges, and that's really not what I want. Go to my wireframe preview and you'll see that the reason for that is these plates are generated everywhere there's an edge. So that doesn't really work that well. So I'll tab into our object. I'll select everything. I'll right click and say subdivide, and I'll go all the way to the far right 10. So now I have all these. Now when I tab back out and I go F3 generate plates, I'm starting to get a lot more interesting parting lines and plate lines. And again, I can go into the chip ship, and there's a very nice one that I had saved. So I'm going to just leave that the way it is right there. Turn off a wireframe, and that looks pretty good. So we'll start right there with that. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about displacement and the materials that I prepared for you to use. So I'm going to select this cube right here, and I'll go into this Space Station K-Pack, and I've got two materials. One's a bump and one's a displace. Let's start with the bump one first, and I'll add the material to that. And you can see there it comes through. And let's take a look real quick at this bump material. So if we look at it, we have at the top, we have lights, and we have that dot grid that we used with JSDisplace. Now I would suggest, again, create your own and drop it in here. And I'll show you, it's easy to do. We click this X button, we say open. I have a folder where I keep these, and I can just grab any image I want. Here are the dot images, and I've done that, and now I've changed the actual dot pattern on that. So that's how simple it is to do that. And you can see now we have yellow, different dots. I can go in here, and if I want to change this to blue, I can do that. I can make them brighter. So there's all kinds of things we can do there. Okay, let's look at color. So the color is using a image called Big Panels Light. So you can see that's what this image is right here. That's the image that I'm using to create the texture. It's an old image I got a long time ago. I have this dirty node, which comes with my EV materials, and it's right here. And you can do things like change the dirt scale or the dirt amount. Like if I say this 0, there's no dirt on it, and that's exactly how that would look. But I think I had it at 0.5. It gives us a little more dirt on here. Anyway, if you want to change this right, the other thing I'll mention is that if you have an object that's been UV mapped, and we're going to do that here in a second, then you're going to want to change these, and I'll show you how to do that here a little bit later. Now that this is done, let's go down to the bottom one, and here's our bump setting. And again, we have our classic. If I want to, I can change that by just clicking this button here, opening, and going into any other image I want, and it'll load that particular image in as our bump. And I can change the strength of the bump here. Let's make it 1. And as you know, in EV, a strength of 1 is going to be pretty obvious, but it's not so obvious in cycles. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's just go in here, and from EV, we'll just switch into cycles, and we can see that that bump is not near as obvious in cycles as it was in EV. So one of the things to keep in mind. Now, one thing I'll also notice is that in the material here in the settings, we have this displacement says bump only. So this means that inside of cycles, it's only going to render as a bump. So let's go ahead and change this to a displacement map. So let's go in here, and we'll grab the displacement material, and I'm going to say add material. And now you'll see that it's quite a bit different, but we're not really getting what we wanted out of it. It doesn't look very displaced at all. And there's a couple reasons for that. First of all, we need to go into cycles, and we need to go to feature set experimental. Second, we need to scroll down to the subdivision area, and we need to set this viewport to 1 also, or maybe we could make it 2 if we're not very fast. We don't have a very fast, make it 2. And then the max subdivisions, I'm going to set to 16. And if my memory runs out, I'll bring it back down farther than 16. But okay, so now we're looking at this, we're saying, hey, it's still not working right. Still don't see any subdivisions. And that's because in our material itself, we want to make sure that our displacement is set to displacement only, right here, displacement only. And I'm going to add a quick subdivision surface. You have to add this for this to work correctly. Simple and adaptive subdivision. And this is going to create a micro displacement, and you can see how well that works. I'm going to move this up, and let's look at our material here. So we have pretty much the same thing. We've got the lights up here, we got the color here, but down here we have the displacement. And I can go in here and I'm going to open up a different one. I'm going to do this one right here, and this is a much smaller one. And here I can, if I want, I can adjust the height at this point, 0.02. So let's go 0.2. Let's just do that and see what happens. And notice how much higher now the displacement is. That's a little too high actually. So let's bring it back down to maybe 0.1. The other thing to notice is that we're at a 0.5 scale, and we may want this to be bigger. So if I want to, with this set to object texture coordinates, I'll just click on this and I'm going to make it 2. And now it's going to get much tinier, as you can see. And if I go the opposite direction, 0.2, it's going to get much larger. So that's how you adjust the scale. And of course, that's true for the color, and it's also true for the lights. So if you have any problems, I suggest go over to the Displacement Primer doc, okay? And especially down here in the notes, you'll see an area on microdisplacement issues. There's also a way to set up microdisplacement. So this goes through all of that and how to make sure that gets done correctly. So that doc is going to help you walk through any issues that you may have in displacement. Okay, now we're back at our basic Starship shape, and let's go ahead and add some of those materials. So first I'm going to go in and I'm going to grab that displacement material right there, add that material, and there it is. And of course we're in EV mode, so we're not going to show the displacement. As you can see, this is called triplanar or box mapping, and let's take a look at that again. So if we look at this, we'll see that we have an object texture coordinate going into mapping where we can adjust the scale. And then we have this image, and the image is set to box under here, not flat, but box. Same thing with all the displacement as well as the image. All these are set to box. So let's just say we want to use UVs. And in this particular case, it's probably not that necessary that we do, but let's just say that we do. So first, if we're going to UV map this, the very first thing we're going to want to do is let's go into our modifiers, and we see we have a mirror modifier, which was placed on it by Shape Generator, and I'm just going to apply that. So I'll apply that, so now that's good. And then what I'll do is I'll go into UV editing. Okay, we come in here and we select everything. You'll see that these are our UVs, and you can see that these actually UVs are kind of curved around. So I'm going to get kind of a weird setting here, and that becomes quite difficult. If I go back to layout now and I start applying these UVs, so I'm going to go into this mapping, for instance, and the way to do that is let's do it in the displacement first. So I'll say UV to vector right there, and then in here instead of box we'll go flat. And so now you start to see that these areas are not quite right. They don't look quite right. Long story short is that if you want to use UV mapping, then what you'll need to do is make these changes as we just showed here. Okay, so now we're back in here, and I've gone ahead and reset this all to triplanar box mapping. So all of those that we looked at before now are set to box and object. So we're back to where we started. And what I want to do now is let's go ahead and set up the displacement. So to do that, we'll go into render mode. And after going into render mode, let's go ahead and let's add a quick light. Shift A, light, point. Oops. Let's make that not a point light. Let's make it a sunlight. And 10 is probably a decent number for us now. Move it up here. Doesn't really matter if it's a directional light. And maybe make it a little smaller, 5. And I'll hit the R button twice. RR, and that's going to allow me to kind of play around and see if I can find some lighting that I like, something like this. And in my world, I've got a world set up. Let's make this 0.2 image. Okay, so that's good. So we have kind of a quick scene set up, and now we'll go into our cycles and we'll turn that on. And notice that we've got this really funky kind of displacement. As we mentioned, we want to go ahead and turn this to experimental. Scroll down to subdivision, 1, 1. Let's leave that at 14. Okay, so after futzing around a little bit with some of these settings, I actually made the lights a little smaller, and I adjusted the actual displacement map here to be a 1-to-1. It looks pretty good. And my settings over here are 1, 1, 4, and 14. If I zoom in, you'll see that it's not so hot. It's not all that great. If I want to get it much higher, I'm going to have to go to 0.5. So let's do that real quick. 0.5, and we'll make this 16. That's about as high as you're going to want to go. And we'll go ahead and let that render for a bit. And you can see when I do that, it generates it quite a bit nicer, but it takes quite a bit longer as well. So that's why I typically like to keep the viewport at least 1, or maybe sometimes I'll keep it at 2, so that it'll actually render much quicker. And then, of course, when we go to render, we'll leave it at 1 or 0.5. So now that we have our displacement map all set up and working, the next thing that we're going to want to do is we want to actually pick some faces on here that we think would be good for adding a bunch of Greebles. And in fact, even before that, we might want to go ahead and throw in a corridor opening in here. Most of you already know how to create the corridor through SYNTH. And my thought is you just take that and you convert everything in mesh and then import it. So let's go ahead and do that next. Okay, I'm speeding this up because this is something that I've gone over before, but right now I'm just going to create a 1-button corridor, and I'm using the new version of SYNTH, which allows you to create different face selections for every single layer. And so what I'm doing right now is I'm just copying all those face selections all over to one layer, hit a button, created the corridor. Now I'm going to hit another button and scale it a little bit, get it where I want it. Next thing I need to do is I'm going to parent everything. No, actually, what I ended up doing there is changing the actual hull shape, and then I'm going to parent everything after getting rid of all the lights. So I parent everything, get it all set the way I want to, and I'll create an insert, a KitOps insert very quickly with that. And once I've done the KitOps insert, I will then generate a quick thumbnail. And the reason why I do this is so that I can see the thumbnail. Once this is done, what I'll do next is I will select the outside of the hull because I need a cutter. I want to create a KitOps insert of the corridor so I can use it in my spaceship. So what I'm going to do is I'll go over here and you'll see that I'm selecting the outside edge right there. And I'll go ahead and grab that and I will duplicate it and separate it. And then I'll go in and edit that and make it a face. And then I'll extrude it all the way back and turn that into a cutter. And I'll go in and create another insert, and that new insert will have that as the cutter, reorient everything around. And really that's it. That's my simple corridor insert. Okay, we're back to our spaceship now, and we want to put the corridor right there in the side here. So I'm going to select this. I'm actually going through here. You can see that I've got a little line here. I'm going to actually line that corridor up directly on that line. So let's go into KitOps, and there's our corridor with that thumb the way we set it. So I'll grab that. And with that set, I'm going to use large. Remember, our scale on this vehicle is huge. And I've already set the texture. So if I mess with the scale now, I'll actually have to redo the texture. So that's okay. Let's just go back to KitOps. And I'll just make this large. Let's make it, I don't know, 400%. I'm not sure what it'll be. But and then with that, I'll just basically hit the button that says Add Insert. And you'll see we're dragging it over here. Now, right now, we're upside down. And so there's a new feature in the new version of KitOps, which isn't out. It's another beta version, but it should be out any day now. And if you hold the Alt key down, you can actually rotate it completely around. And so that's really nice. So I just did that. We dropped it in, and I'll go to the top view. So I'm going to scale this so that it goes all the way across and just barely punches out the back. Yep, it's punched out the back. So it's going all the way through. And with that done, I am going to hit the G button. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm just going to move the corridor in place and get it to where it needs to be, and then actually place the person that we already have in the scene in the corridor. Then we'll add a little light and we'll check it out and make sure it works right. So that's what all this is about. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to figure out where we want to put our Greebles in here. And that shouldn't be too hard. I'll come in here and hit Tab. And let's say that we want to take this surface to this surface, and that's click here and then Control Shift click here, and that'll get us all of those. And I'll go into here and I'm going to call this Greebles surface, and then of course we assign it. So I'm going to speed this up here. I'm just going to go in and select a lot of the different faces that I know that I want to put Greebles on, and we'll do that in a couple different ways once we get into SYNTH. But for now, what we're doing right here is we're just selecting faces and assigning them the Greeble material. Next, I'm going to create the front windshield area. So I'm going to take this and this, add a new material, and we're going to call that windshield, and I'm going to make this one a glass, and we'll just leave the roughness down very low. And then I can tab out of this, and oops, tab back in, assign that, tab back out. Okay, so there's the glass. And then tab back in there. With this selected, I'm going to say Shift D, and I'm going to right click and drag it off. So I made a copy of that. P, make the selection, tab. That generated shape is going to be called windshield frame. And I'll just go ahead and add a modifier, a wireframe modifier. Very, very thin. Okay, and that works. Okay, as you can see, I've added a few more selection groups for the Greeble areas. Let's tab back out of that. And now what I want to do is I'm going to change these to bump. Remember, these are already set as displacement, and we want to change these to bump because I don't want to mess with the displacement. I'm going to put a lot of Greebles in there, and the displacement's going to be moving around, and it's just going to get quite a bit confusing. So I think I'll just use a different material in here that's not going to displace. So we'll go into the bump, and because this is a slot, I can't just add that into a slot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the insert for the material. I'll drag it on there like this. And as soon as it's done, I'll hit X and I'll just delete it. But it did load the material in. So when I come in here and I go into this Greebles, I will see that now I have that bump one, and I can drop that in, and you can see now that the bump one is in there. So as we can see, the bump is a lot smoother than the displace one, which makes sense. There's very little showing at all. So let's go in here and let's go ahead and change that bump to 1 and 1. And now we can see that that looks a little better. And that's what it's going to look like as we go through there. So we have that set up correctly. So next thing for us to do is we need to use SYNTH to go ahead and start to populate some of this. So let's go into SYNTH, and I'm going to go to recipe. I'm going to load a recipe, and I'm going to use the space service junk recipe. I'll load that. And it's got a base layer, a main layer, and an antenna layer. So I want to first set this up scale wise. So I'm going to tab into here, and I'll go in and I'm going to select just what I want for that base layer. So let's go in here and we'll select that area right there, and I'll set that for the base layer. And I'm going to turn these others off right now, and I'm going to say do it. And because of the scale, you can see these things are just ridiculously small. First, let's add another object into this. I'm going to add this Greeble 8. So we have two different ones, and we'll leave them all both at 100%. And then I can go down into transformation, and we can see that the scale is 0. So let's scale it at about 300%. And we'll go back up here and we'll do it again. And now we see that, yeah, okay, that works pretty good. So I'm going to speed this part up. It's basically a very redundant over and over. I'm just kind of tweaking the settings to make sure I get each one of these layers set right. And once I get them set right on this one basic surface, then I can go and start adding more surfaces. And so the point being is that I'll keep tweaking things like the scale and the number and even the frequency. Like for instance, the big storage tanks there's just too many of them. So I can adjust the cover parameter to change how many of those are. And here I'm going and I'm just basically selecting a lot more faces and starting to populate these as I go. And sometimes I see they don't work, and so I'll go back and rework them a little bit. And once I get it all done, and I'll keep playing with the random seed value so I can make sure that each layer is populated correctly. And one of the things that's interesting is that when you use the random placement style instead of the rows and the columns and the grids, it's going to distribute the number of inserts over the total face selection. So as you add more face selections, you need to up that number. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So those are our Greebles for now, and we may come back and mess with it a little bit later. So a quick point I'd like to make, and that is if you're actually rendering displacement in cycles, unless you see it change, you're going to get the same displacement map. See, as I'm zooming out. So if I want to get something really tight, like up in here, then I zoom into here, and then I need to change something in order to get it to work. So I'm going to go into this mid-level, And notice that this is a radius corner. So if I make that something like 0.5 on our displacement map, we're going to update the mesh here, and this is going to get a lot tighter. These will get a lot tighter. And vice versa, if I go the opposite direction, if I go -5, they're going to get a lot looser. Typically what I like to do is just go ahead and add a bevel along here, and that's what I did earlier. So let's just go ahead and do that. Okay, so now I've gone through and I've actually added bevels to everything. So now when we look at this, we're going to get a little better read. Now, one of the things I want to point out is that if I set the displacement, if it sets a displacement in the viewport like this, let's go ahead and just set that to 0. And it's going to update the mesh here. And now it's at 64. And so I'm going to zoom all the way in. And look how bad the actual resolution is here. But if I come back in and force a regeneration of the mesh at this closer scale, we're going to see that it looks a heck of a lot better. There you go. You can see that. So in the viewport, the actual view makes a difference. It won't force a refresh. I mean, you can continue to do this. It's not going to force the refresh. The view resolution is going to make a difference. So that's something you're just going to want to keep your eye on, and that is what resolution did it actually generate at one point. So now that we have these bevels on here, we can actually go ahead and up this mid-level to something maybe like 0.4, and it will hold a lot better in terms of resolution. Now, of course, my settings are very low at this spot, but you start to get the idea as you look at this. So next, what do we have to do? Well, now we need to set up the scene, and to do that, we're going to go into the camera view, and we'll get this the way we want it. And I'm going to go into my world, new world, and the background color is going to be black and the strength is 0 because lighting in space is harsh. And I think we have some pretty good lighting here. Let's set this up something like this, and we'll lock the camera to view so that we're staying in there. And then I'll go under File, Import Images Planes. I'll choose this Earth right here, and we'll set it to be an emit with 1, and let's just leave it like that for now. And we import the images planes. So basically what I did was I went ahead and added that Earth, and I had to move it around a little bit and get it positioned in the window the way I wanted to. And then I adjusted the emission a little bit. I added a brightness contrast node to it so that it wasn't quite so bright. Then I double checked the actual sun setting and wanted to move that around, get it a little bit brighter. And then, of course, I duplicated it and put one at the bottom facing up to give it a little bit of a blue glow like you can see there. And once that was all done, it was really just a matter of continuing to play with the settings. And you might notice that sometimes I'll actually use Eevee to set up the lighting because it's easier than with cycles. So this is really all there is to it, creating these kinds of super displacement renderings. And I'll go ahead and tweak this a little more and then generate a rendering out of it. Keep in mind that if you're having problems actually creating a rendering, go to my Google Doc and it'll help explain that. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you online. Bye.